The nervous system is one of our most complete systems. It permeates all of the cells of the body. It's, if you touch here, there are nerves there. If you touch here, there are nerves there. And if you touch down on the bottom of your foot, there are nerves there. So with all of these nerves, it's quite possible that something could go wrong with some of them. We will discuss some of these things that go wrong with the nervous system in this program, and we hope you'll join us with our talk on neurologic problems.
The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented. Welcome to Help Yourself to Health with Dr. Agatha Thrash of Uchee Pines Institute. And now, here's your host, Dr. Thrash.
It's a wonderful age to live in which we're learning so many things for so many diseases. I just love living in this age because I love understanding some new things about what's happening to people, especially those with neurologic problems. There was a time when we didn't have much that we could do for a lot of neurologic problems, that now we know more about the disease, and we know more about the nervous system and how it functions, and so we can help people who have neurologic problems. And one that I would like to talk about is multiple sclerosis. It's really quite a common disorder, and it occurs a little bit more frequently in women than in men, but in all areas of society, all levels of the geography and of the socioeconomic levels, people have multiple sclerosis. Now we do find, however, that in tropical areas they have far less than they do in more northerly climes. Why is that? We aren't entirely certain, but one thing may be that something happens to the nervous system in early childhood in people who live in tropical countries that protects them throughout their life from multiple sclerosis. What that is, we don't know. Whether it's the continual warmth or whether it's the kind of food or the way they live or what it is, we're just not certain. But if a person from the tropics goes to a place in the very northernmost parts of the world, they carry with them the risk of multiple sclerosis that they had in their home area, not in the area that they are transplanted to. And those who are born in northern climates carry with them to a tropical area the same risks that they would have if they still continue to live in the more northern climate. Now, some things about multiple sclerosis are quite puzzling. Why it is that some people get a type of multiple sclerosis that goes to death in just a few weeks. It's just a very accelerated form of multiple sclerosis. Why does that happen? No one knows. Why is it that some people will get multiple sclerosis and they have a very slow progress through a long life, eventually succumbing to the multiple sclerosis, but only after decades have passed? This is puzzling. We don't know exactly why this is. There are things that we know to do for the person with multiple sclerosis to slow down the process, and I'll mention a few of those. There are many of them, so in order to get the full picture, you would need to make a study of multiple sclerosis, which we have done and have written up at Uchee Pines, and by simply going on the web to the 3ABN website and clicking on Uchee Pines in the contacts, you can find how to get in touch with us to get that written up paper on multiple sclerosis. But some of the things that we have found are that diet is very helpful. The kind of diet that one should use is one that has no hard fats in it. You can just use all the soft fats that you would like, and they will furnish the amount of saturated fats that you need for your essential fatty acids without giving you those fatty acids that may be harmful to your nervous system. And then, of course, the diet should be of a nature that will make it so you will not gain weight. Because if the muscles get weak with the disease, the more weight they carry, the more difficult it's going to be for you to get around. So the person with multiple sclerosis should guard the weight very carefully. Now, another thing about diet is that it should be principally vegetarian. Vegetarian people do better than people who are not vegetarian who have multiple sclerosis. Now, another thing that you should know about what we have discovered about the cause is that in multiple sclerosis, people who have chilled extremities early in life, maybe this has to do with the place that they live, this may have to do with multiple sclerosis. There was some research done a number of years ago that indicated that sick animals, pets, or livestock that the child may have been exposed to, sick livestock, that there was some thought that that might be involved in the person's background. Certainly for any household with children in it, they should not have pets in the same household. The pets should live somewhere else, and children should be taught that when they have contact with the animals, they always wash the hands before they touch the face or the mouth or any other thing that might go into the mouth. Now, in addition to multiple sclerosis, there is another very serious type of neurologic problem called epilepsy. And Dr. Don Miller, who is with me today, will talk with you about epilepsy. Dr. Miller?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Thrash. I was in Zambia a few years ago. It was a Sabbath at lunchtime. We were gathered in the cafeteria there, and it sounded like someone dropped a bowling ball or a watermelon, a cross between the two, on the other side of the room. I looked, and there was one of the men, the African young men, on the floor writhing around. I went straight over there, and he was having a seizure, an epileptic seizure. And so he went through the stages of the seizure, and he finally got done. He was into the sleep phase, and afterwards I went and talked with him. I says, "How long have you had epilepsy?" And he says, "I've never had a seizure before. I've never had epilepsy." So we started doing a little bit of an investigation, what caused this problem. So it turned out he was having a bout of malaria. He was taking a new malaria medication, and one of the symptoms was, or one of the side effects was, seizures. And so we could trace it back. Whenever a person's having a seizure, try to find out, if, let's say someone's having a seizure, they've never had one before, they may not be epileptic, or although it is a seizure of an epileptic nature, but find out what might have precipitated this one. A very common cause for seizures today is the food additive called aspartame. It's been shown to cause seizures in humans, and so we should make sure we're taking none of these things with aspartame in the ingredients. That means most of your diet colas, many of the little artificial sweeteners that you put in whatever you might be drinking that needs sweetening. Stay away from aspartame. Basically, an epileptic seizure is a disturbance in the transmission of electrical signals in the brain, and it can be caused by many different things. A head injury. Now, you may have had a head injury 10 years ago, and it might be starting to manifest itself now in seizures. It does not happen immediately, so look in the past. Have you injured your head? Have you injured your neck? Have you injured your spinal cord? All these things can precipitate and lead to epileptic seizures sometime down the line. So be aware of those things. There are some other causes. High fevers. Again, a high fever sometime in the past can set you up for seizures in the future. Infections. Many infections can set a person up for the seizures. Constipation in the transverse colon. Now, where's the transverse colon? Basically, your small intestine leads out into the cecum, which is down in the area of your appendix. As a matter of fact, hanging off your cecum is your little appendix, and then it goes up the ascending colon, and then across, just below your diaphragm, you might almost think, is your, or a little bit lower, is your transverse colon, and then it goes down to your descending. It is congestion and constipation in the transverse colon for over 100 years. This has been one of the supposed causes and probable causes of epileptic seizures. And that is normally caused by, and one of the reasons they've been talking about for over 100 years is soft bread. These old things, you can take a whole loaf of bread and wad it up in your hand. Basically, they recommend that a person that has epilepsy stay off of especially soft breads, but maybe all breads and all mushy grains, because they can tend to constipate the transverse colon. Good thing to stay away from. Also, a malfunction of ileocecal valve. You've got this little valve that just as your small intestine goes into the cecum, it's called the ileocecal valve. If there's a malfunction there, powerful toxins can back up from the colon into the small bowel and cause some toxification of the small bowel, and then there could be some leakage into the peritoneal cavity, and it could get into the bloodstream and affect the neurological apparatus in the brain even. And so this could be another cause. And so stay away from, you really can't stay away from a malfunctioning ileocecal valve, but you can try to keep yourself from having distension in the bowel over too much pressure from constipation or straining, things like this. Stay away from those things and keep that valve in good shape. So what are some things you can do for epilepsy? Now, we're not going to say you can take this herb and it's okay. If there was a cure for it, a simple cure, we wouldn't have epilepsy today. But there are things that we can do to help with it. Number one, the person who has got epilepsy needs to be on a regular schedule. They've got to be religiously regular in their schedule. Also, they need to be in the exercising programs. We find that people have any type of neurological problem, exercise is extremely beneficial for that particular person. They need to have a lot of raw vegetables and fruits, extremely good. Their nutrition has to come up far higher than it probably already was. So fruits and vegetables, a lot of them raw. They should do some B6 supplementation, which can also help the nerves in the body. Yellow and orange fruits and vegetables. I like the way God has made his fruits and vegetables. He color codes them. So if you have this type of a problem, eat the yellow and the orange thing. And then do some other supplementation. You can do some manganese, 25 milligrams a day. Some magnesium, about 1 gram a day or 1,000 milligrams a day can also help. Exercise. Now, if a person has epilepsy, it comes in 4 stages. The first stage you need to be aware of is called the aura. Most people who are going to have a seizure go through this thing, and they know. And anyone who knows what their aura is can tell this person's getting ready to have a seizure. There's a few things you can do at this point. Over 100 years ago, John Harvey Kellogg recommended that to get a cold treatment, a cold pale pour at this time can sometimes short-circuit the epileptic seizure. I've heard about people when they get into this aura, if they realize that their aura is a little bit longer than normal, if their aura normally is a long aura, they should get outside and get into some intense physical activity, and sometimes that alone can short-stop the seizure and you not have the seizure. So doing these simple things, getting the body back in shape, when we're in a disease situation, we need to, no matter what the disease is, do everything we know to do right. And sometimes the body itself then will say, okay, we're finally doing things right, and correct the situations itself. I think that's pretty good advice, Dr. Thrash, no matter what we might have.
That sounds very good. Parkinson's disease, another form of serious neurologic disorder, is fairly common in our society, and involves about equally men and women, maybe just a little bit more men than women. And the neurologic problems that they have begin often with a little tremor. And the tremor may be at first barely discernible, but eventually it gets to be quite a lot more. In addition to the tremor, there is rigidity. And the rigidity may be of a very special kind, so that when you pull on the arm, instead of getting a smooth movement such as you just saw, they will do something like this called cogwheeling. They relax just spasmodically, and so you get this cogwheeling effect that comes on with the Parkinson's disease. So the tremor, the stiffness or rigidity, those are two very important symptoms and almost always have them. The tremor may also be what is called the pill rollers type of tremor, where the person has a little bit of rigidity involving the major part of the hand, but the fingers do this little pill rolling thing that the pharmacists used to do when they made their pills. Now, some other things that are very important in Parkinson's and making the disease is the fact that Parkinson's people will have slowness, that's slowness in speaking, slowness in uptake, and slowness on walking. They tend to get into an activity rather slowly. Now, there are those are the major symptoms, and there are a bunch of minor ones as well, and I will just mention a few of these. They may have a problem with a masked face. Balance can be a pretty major problem. Lack of balance or loss of the ability to stand upright. And then writing with very small letters, they often do that. They may get a greasy face. That tends to go along with Parkinson's as well. They may have difficulty in speaking. They may get a low voice. In fact, sometimes this may cause a little marital distress. Before the wife understands what's going on with her husband, he begins to talk in this low, rather slow voice, and she may think that he is being hostile toward her, when actually he is just having a phase of his disease. Sometimes a year or more will go by from the onset of fairly marked symptoms before the diagnosis is made. Families will often make excuses for their family member and try to cover these up in front of other people. The emotional lability that they have, crying at the drop of a hat, if they see somebody they haven't seen for a long time, even though they may just be acquaintances, they may have an emotional response of bringing forth tears, tears that may require a little while to get under control. Then they have also difficulty in swallowing. They may have that. This is one of the minor symptoms as well, and a number of other minor symptoms that can come with Parkinson's disease. Once the diagnosis is made, then there are several things that the person can do to slow down the disease. One is never overeat. It has been associated with the development of Parkinson's, that of overeating. It's just overeating of all food. Even people who are eating basically a very good diet can, because of the mere fact that they overeat, they get symptoms of Parkinson's. And many people, especially if they get past the age of 60, when they overeat a single meal, they'll find that an ordinary steady hand becomes a little steady and tremulous. Another thing is that the person should move. We see also that in individuals with Parkinson's, often they are not exercisers. But with the stiffness that comes with Parkinson's disease, if they keep the muscles moving, just as a moving stream will not freeze, so the moving muscle will not get stiff. So they should make a very definite effort to stay moving, and any kind of exercise that they can do will be helpful. Now, fava beans and velvet beans are also very helpful. They have L-DOPA in them. The very best source of L-DOPA in the vegetable kingdom is from fava beans. These are big, broad beans. You can buy these at a health food store. And if you can find those that are sproutable, you can increase the quantity of L-DOPA by about 10 times. Velvet beans, another form of good bean for L-DOPA. Then there are some exercises for the shuffling feet. Of course, the flexibility exercises. Be certain not to wear shoes that have gripping type of soles, because shoes that slide can help a person who has Parkinson's, who is doing the shuffling gait, can help them not to fall. If the shoes, when they're going to slide the shoe and it grips the surface, then they're more likely to topple. Learn where the support groups are for Parkinson's disease in your community and join one of those so that you can learn how best to deal with this problem. Now, another interesting feature of neurologic disease is that of depression. While not basically a problem with altered nerves or sick nerves, it is certainly a problem of the central nervous system. And Dr. Don Miller is going to talk with you about depression now.
There are various forms of depression. We'll just talk about just the garden variety depression. Now, there is a thing called seasonal affective disorder, that a person going into a certain season, usually the winter seasons, the Christmas holidays, whatever else, they get into this depression. And these things can pretty much be covered by some of the things I'll be talking about right now. Basically, you can have physiological or psychological causes for your depression. If a person's got a chronic illness like hepatitis or some other type of long-term illness, it can be very depressing for the person. But it's also if there's a loss, if the person loses a loved one or loses a job, it can send them into a depression. And you can tell if a person's in depression. You can just look at their face. Their face is expressionless. Basically, they are pretty much flat line on many of the different areas. Their appetite goes away. Their ambitions go away. They don't sleep very well. Their energy's low. They just don't think straight. A lot of different things are just sort of flat. It's just a boring existence. So what can you do for a person who's into this type of depression? One, there's got to be a way to lift up the thoughts. There's a law that I like very much. It's called the law of reciprocal influence. As a person thinks in his heart, so is he. If a person feels depressed and he goes around telling everybody how depressed he is, it only reinforces that depression. So the best thing you can do for a person who's in depression is find some way to turn their thoughts and their minds and their expressions, their words, into something more elevating. And often if you talk with a person depressed, they're going to tell you all their problems. And sometimes it's good to listen. It's always good to listen to them. But somehow in that conversation, keep trying to find a piece of blessing that they can find in their darkness. Always try to lift their thoughts up and say, well, you know, what went good for you yesterday? Or if you can think of something that's good about them, you tell them. And you're going to find that as they express positive things, their spirits are going to rise. A person with depression needs to have sunlight. We find that people who live in northern climes have more depression than those who live in southern climes. We recommend for people with depression that as soon as it's time to get up in the morning, they turn on all the lights in the room. Bright lights in the eye are extremely good for someone who's depressed. The person who's depressed should get a lot of outdoor activity. Exercise is good for depression. Sunshine is good for depression. Fresh air is good for depression. And so we need to get them into these particular things. Deep breathing exercises is extremely good for depression. And there's a very easy exercise I'm going to teach you right now. What you basically do, you're taking a walk. It's a good time to do your deep breathing exercise. As you walk, count how many steps it takes to draw in one breath of air. Let's say you're walking along and you start to inhale and you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, you've got your air in. All right, so that's your factor of 1. And then what you want to do is multiply that factor by 4. So that makes it up to 16. So what you do is you hold your breath for a factor of 16. And so you've walked along, breathing into a count of 4, holding it for a count of 16 or 16 steps, and then you exhale it for a factor of 2, which means 8. And so and sometimes it's pretty hard to get the last bit out because 8 seconds or 8 steps is a long time. You're going to find this to be very good for many different problems. Exercise, regularity, sunshine. There's an interesting study that came out of Ohio State University. They found a good way to eliminate depression, mood swings, irritability, nightmares, and they did 3 things to do this. Now, you write these 3 things down. If you have somebody who's depressed, this could be the cause. Sugary junk foods, refined carbohydrates, and caffeine-type beverages like coffee, tea, cola, and then chocolate. Eliminating those 3 things found that many people who had depression and all these things, it was completely gone. A good suggestion, and it doesn't cost you any money to do it. Often certain drugs can cause a person to be depressed. So look at the side effects of drugs. If a person's taking a drug, if a side effect is depression, then try to find a different drug that does not give them that problem. Now, there are some herbs you can take. Dr. Thrash has mentioned them, and many times the same herbs that are for one thing in the neurological system is good for another. St. John's wort, of course, is good for depression. Now, you're going to hear that they're saying, oh, St. John's wort is not good. Well, the reason why they many times say this for a person who's depressed because they're already taking antidepressives. And the St. John's wort is so effective, it's like getting a double whammy. So we recommend the St. John's wort. Valerian is another very good tea. And ginkgo biloba, another good tea for someone who has depression. So lift your spirits. Be happy. Talk positive things. And Dr. Thrash, I believe that as you talk positive things, your spirits will rise.
Oh, yes, it does. And it has been shown also that the expression that you have on the face can also make a difference in how you feel inside. So if you don't feel really bright and cheerful, put a cheerful look on the face anyway, and that will help not only you but the people around you. Now, the exercise of taking a breath for a certain number of steps and then multiplying by a factor of 4, holding the breath for that length of time, and then exhaling on the factor of 2, that little exercise is also very good for hypertension. Hypertension is also related to the nerves in many ways. The way that we think can influence the tightness of the muscle strength in our small blood vessels, and that, of course, does have a very profound effect on the blood pressure. So learning how to breathe in a proper way, even if you need to get one of these recording devices that gives you a signal when to breathe in and when to breathe out, that can be also very good for hypertension. Now, in neurologic diseases, we need to study every one that we may have so that we can find the very best treatment for the neurologic disorder. We have not covered everything by any means, and new things are being developed all the time so that there are constant changes. May the Lord bless you with a good neurologic system.